You don't know what to do with what you're seeing. Part of you wants to believe it. Another part, the part that's already been disappointed, the part that's learned to protect itself, that part tells you to wait. Not to rush into something that might only be a temporary illusion. Tonight, I'm going to reveal to you what's really going on in this person's psyche. Not on the surface. In the depths. Where the real decisions are made, long before consciousness has had time to formulate them. And what you will understand tonight may change the way you experience this waiting. Not by giving you false hope, but by showing you what is really happening and what it means for you. Carl Jung, one of the greatest explorers of the human soul the world has ever known, spent his entire life mapping the invisible territories of the psyche. Those deep regions where real decisions are made, where real fears accumulate, and where real awareness awakens, sometimes brutally. And the phenomenon you observe in this person, this nascent fear of losing you, this alarm that begins to sound in their unconscious, Jung would not have considered a coincidence. He would have immediately recognized it as the expression of one of the most powerful psychic mechanisms in existence. This mechanism is called the unconscious. In short, the unconscious, according to Jung, is not simply what we have forgotten or repressed. It is an autonomous, active force that pursues its own objectives and acts on our behavior and emotions long before our consciousness has time to intervene. And tonight, it is this person's unconscious mind, not their conscious thoughts, not their rational decisions, that is forcing their hand. Jung observed something fundamental about how the fear of loss functions in the human psyche. He noted that this fear almost never arises when the loss is still abstract, theoretical, or distant. It appears at the precise moment when something in the unconscious perceives that the loss is becoming real. Not probable. Real. And here's what that means in concrete terms in your situation. If you observe a change in this person's behavior, a renewed attentiveness, a gentleness, a different presence, it's not the result of a conscious decision on their part. It's not that they've reflected and concluded that they need to change their attitude. It was her unconscious that detected something. A change in your energy, a drop in your availability, a difference in how you inhabit the space between you. And this unconscious, which functions like an alarm system infinitely more sensitive than conscious thought, began to react before she herself understood why. This isn't manipulation on your part, nor is it weakness on hers. It's the psyche doing exactly what it's designed to do, protect what matters. But here's the hidden mechanism that most people never see, and which is perhaps the most important thing you can understand tonight. The fear of losing someone and the actual value we place on them are two very different things in the psyche, and the unconscious doesn't always distinguish between them. The unconscious mind reacts to the threat of loss even when the conscious value placed on a person was insufficient. It reacts even when everyday behavior did not reflect what the person truly felt deep down. It reacts because it is programmed to preserve, not because it has suddenly understood something new. And here is the crucial distinction that Jung would have made. The fear of loss is a signal, but a signal is not yet a transformation. What this person's unconscious is telling them is that they risk losing something important. But what they do with this signal, if they truly listen to it, if they delve deep enough to understand what it reveals about themselves and not just about you, that's where the difference lies between a temporary jolt and real change. And somewhere deep down, you already knew it, not consciously. But something inside you knew that what you were observing in this person wasn't simply a superficial change. Something inside you knew that something deeper was happening. Something that even she might not have fully understood yet. Here is the central paradox of this evening, the one that Jung would have posed without hesitation and which may destabilize something within you. The unconscious forces someone's hand not to give them what they want, but to show them what they were avoiding seeing. Just one sentence, and it contains a truth that goes far beyond your particular situation. Let me explain why this is true, and why it's more important than any question about the future of this relationship. When this person's subconscious begins to make them fear losing you, their first reaction, instinctive, almost automatic, is to try to reclaim what they perceive as threatened. That's why you're observing this change in behavior. That's why something has changed in the way they interact with you. But the unconscious mind doesn't do this so she'll get you back. It does this to force her to look at something she was avoiding. What was she avoiding? Perhaps the reality of what you represent to her, a reality she couldn't allow herself to face as long as you were there, available, certain, predictable. Perhaps the reality of her own fears of commitment, her own avoidance patterns, her own contradictions between what she wanted and what she was capable of giving. Perhaps the reality is that she built a distance that seemed safe to her, but which now, as she perceives the real consequences, turns out to be much less comfortable than she thought. The unconscious forces her hand because it knows, even if she isn't yet consciously aware of it, that something important is at stake. Something that goes beyond the simple question of your presence in her life. Something that concerns her own capacity to fully inhabit a relationship, to truly let someone in, to actively choose rather than letting things happen or fall apart through inertia. And that's why this paradox is at the heart of everything. The unconscious doesn't force her hand to give her what she thinks she wants. It forces her hand to show her what she needs to understand. And what she does with this understanding, whether she stays at the surface of the fear or goes deep enough to grasp its meaning, that's where the real answer to everything you're wondering about tonight lies. Let me now describe to you the concrete phases that the psyche of someone who is beginning to experience the fear of losing you goes through. The first phase is called the awakening of lack. This is the most subtle phase. Something has changed in the texture of her days. A slight absence where your presence was usual. A silence where there was an exchange. A difference in the energy of the space between you that her unconscious perceives long before her consciousness has the words to describe it. She doesn't yet know it's a void. She might feel restless, slightly irritable for no apparent reason, a vague sense that something is missing without being able to pinpoint exactly what. It's not fear yet. It's the beginning of the emptiness that your presence filled without her realizing it. Think of someone who notices a silence in a room and only then realizes that music had been playing for hours. It's only in its absence that one perceives what it was. The second phase is called conscious resistance. This is the most delicate phase, and the one where many situations get stuck. Because the awakening of longing produces a reaction in some people that is not to reach out to you, but to withdraw even further. The unconscious has awakened something painful, the perception of a possible loss, and the automatic reaction of the defensive psyche is to minimize what is felt, to tell oneself that it's not so important, to rationalize, to find reasons why the distance was justified, why what you represented wasn't so unique, why life goes on just fine without that presence. You may have experienced this phase from the outside without recognizing it. This period where the person seemed to close down even more right after a moment of openness, as if something had made them recoil just as they were starting to move forward. This retreat is not rejection. It is fear defending itself. The third phase is called the breakthrough of the unconscious. This is the moment when defenses no longer hold, when rationalization gives way, when what the unconscious has carried from the beginning, the truth about what you represent, the reality of what is being lost, finally crosses the surface of consciousness. This breakthrough can take 1,000 forms. A dream that leaves a lasting impression upon waking. An ordinary moment that triggers a disproportionate emotion. seeing something that reminds them of you, hearing a song, passing a place that bore your mark, a casual conversation that suddenly transforms into something more real, more open, less filtered. Jung observed that the unconscious always finds a way. Always. Not necessarily through the main entrance. Sometimes through a window, sometimes through a dream, sometimes through an emotion that arises unexpectedly at a moment when no defenses were down. But it finds its way. And it is through this breakthrough that the change in behavior you are observing begins to become visible from the outside. The fourth phase is called the movement towards you. This is the phase you may be going through right now. This return to your space, cautious, imperfect, sometimes clumsy, which seeks to recreate a connection that distance had eroded. This movement is real. It comes from something sincere in his unconscious, but it's important that you understand what it is and what it isn't yet. This isn't a transformation yet. It's an impulse produced by the fear of losing, which is different from a conscious and lasting decision to change the way she relates to you. The difference isn't in the intention, it's in the depth. The intention can be sincere, but the depth still insufficient. And time, only time and the concrete behaviors it reveals, will tell you which side you're on. The fifth phase is called the test of duration. This is the phase that most people miss in their understanding of this type of situation, because their attention is focused on the return, on the movement towards you, without seeing what comes after. What comes next is ordinary life. It's not grand gestures. It's not moments of intense emotion. It's how that person is with you when nothing is threatening, when the fear has subsided, when the urgency of potential loss is no longer there to keep them awake. Jung would have said that it is there, in ordinary life, in the repetition of days, in the way someone chooses again and again to really see you rather than take you for granted. That it is revealed whether what has happened in their unconscious has produced a real transformation or just a temporary jolt. And that's the question you'll have to ask yourself at that point. Not, has she come back? But, is she different? Has something changed in the way she inhabits the relationship? Not when she's afraid of losing you, but when she knows you're there. But here's what Jung would add. And this is the part most people avoid, because it completely reverses the perspective. Everything we've explored tonight concerns this person's psyche, its mechanisms, its unconscious, its fear, its phases, and it's real, and it deserves to be understood. But if you stop there, if you spend all this evening analyzing what is happening in her,